Hello, everyone. Every night we walk through the dust of history, every forgotten disaster, and tonight we're standing at the edge of one you may not survive, at least not in your dreams. Imagine looking out at the sea and watching it turn from silver to a thick, inky black, swallowing the moonlight. The year is 1908, and you're in a fishing village so quiet you can hear the oars creak from miles away. This night will change everything. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel, but only if you really like what I do here. And let me know where you're listening from in the comments and what time it is. The village rests against a rugged shoreline where wooden boats sway like sleeping animals in the tide. Salt hangs heavy in the air, the kind that sticks to your lips and makes your clothes damp before you realize it. Lanterns glow faintly in doorways, and laughter from a late card game slips through an open window. You stand at the water's edge, barefoot, feeling the pull of the tide against your toes. That's when you notice the faint shimmer, far out at the horizon, like oil sliding over glass. At first you tell yourself it's just the light, moonlight bending through clouds maybe. The fishermen say the sea plays tricks at night, and you want to believe them. But the shimmer grows darker, richer, almost too thick for water. It creeps inward slowly, as if it has no intention of stopping, and the soft waves seem to hesitate before reaching you. The usual crisp scent of brine has turned heavier, carrying a faint bitterness, like burnt rope. Someone down the beach calls out, pointing toward the horizon, their voice trembling with something between awe and dread. Others come running, their bare feet kicking sand into the air. A few cross themselves, others mutter the old prayers taught to them as children. You watch as the blackness spreads, swallowing the starlight reflected on the water. It's not just color, it's texture, moving in long, lazy swirls that make your stomach turn. The oldest fisherman in the village, a man with a beard the color of driftwood, stares at it without blinking. "I've seen this before," he says, voice low but certain. No one dares to ask when or where. His eyes are fixed on the incoming dark, like it's an enemy he's been waiting to face. Behind him, a dog begins to bark wildly, its body stiff and ears flat against its head. As the night deepens, the sound of the sea changes. The rhythmic shush of waves fades into something duller, almost like liquid moving through a closed room. You can feel it in your chest, a slow thrum that seems to sync with your heartbeat. Children are pulled back from the shoreline, their small hands clutching their mother's skirts. A group of young men light torches and wade in up to their knees, only to retreat quickly, torches sputtering with a hiss when the black water touches them. One brave or foolish boy dips his fingers into the dark tide and holds them up to the firelight. They are coated in a film so thick it clings even as he shakes his hand. His expression shifts from curiosity to horror when the smell hits, a sour, metallic tang that makes several people gag. No one speaks for a long moment. Then someone whispers, "It's alive!" and the crowd takes a collective step back. You stay rooted to the sand, unable to look away. The black sheen keeps crawling toward you, slow but steady, as if the sea has all the time in the world. Farther out, something moves just beneath the surface, a ripple that travels against the current, smooth and deliberate. It's too dark to see what it is, but your mind supplies shapes. A vast shadow, maybe, or something with eyes reflecting faint points of light. Your chest tightens, and your mouth tastes faintly of iron. The village bells ring once, sharp and metallic, not for fire, not for church, but for warning. It's a sound that says this is not a night to linger outdoors. People begin to shuffle away, casting glances over their shoulders. Still, a handful remain with you, unable to look away from the sight. The sea turning black under the pale moon, stretching out like a living thing toward the sleeping houses. Morning arrives slower than usual, as if the sun is hesitant to touch the village. You wake to the sound of distant gulls, fewer than normal, and the soft murmur of people gathering in the square. The air feels heavier than it should, warm for early morning, carrying a faint, bitter scent from the shore. When you step into the market, you find knots of fishermen and traders speaking in low voices, faces drawn tight, eyes darting toward the sea that still glimmers with that strange black film. The laughter and bargaining of a normal morning are gone, replaced by the hiss of whispered speculation. Near the well, two women talk quickly under their breath. their baskets still empty. One insists it's a curse from a shipwrecked captain whose body was never buried. Another claims it's the sea turning before revealing treasure, like the old stories say. A man selling nets says his father saw this once, far away, and it ended with every fish in the bay belly up. You catch fragments, bad luck, oil from deep under, sign of the end. And though no one admits it, every glance carries the same quiet fear. An old mariner sits on a stool near the bread stall, running his thumb over a brass compass. His face is tanned and creased like old leather, and he watches the tide from a distance. When you greet him, he tilts his head toward the horizon and says, "That's not water anymore. Not the way we know it." You ask what he means, but he only shakes his head. If you've sense, you'll keep away from it. The last time I saw the sea turn like that, it didn't give back what it took. His words settle over you like a damp cloth, heavy and hard to shake off. Merchants try to continue business, but trade is thin. The fishmongers have nothing fresh to sell. The boats that went out early came back empty or not at all. The fruit seller watches nervously as her grapes sit untouched, their sweet smell clashing with the acrid tang drifting in from the beach. The baker sets out his bread, but even he stops kneading dough to peer at the water between customers. Every few minutes, someone runs up from the shore to deliver some new rumor. A dolphin carcass on the sand, a boat hull coated in black slime, a crab scuttling backward as if fleeing. A group of children, too young to understand the danger, race through the market playing a game they've invented called Black Wave. One runs ahead, pretending to be the sea, and the rest scream and scatter. A few adults scold them, but the game repeats until a sharp voice calls them home. Even in play, the shadow of the sea's change creeps into their minds. The word black is whispered more than any other word today. By mid-morning, a fisherman named Paolo stumbles into the market, pale and shaking. His boat never made it out past the inlet. He swears the water near the reef moved wrong, as if something large passed under him without a ripple on the surface. He says the smell made him cough until his eyes watered, and when he pulled up his line, the bait was gone, hook clean, like it had dissolved away. His voice cracks when he says this, and even those who don't believe in curses fall silent. You wander toward the edge of the market, where the square meets the narrow path to the pier. From here you can see the line where normal blue water meets that creeping blackness, shifting and curling like smoke underwater. The sun is high enough now to glint off it, making the surface shine in places. But the shine is wrong. Too thick, too slow. A shiver runs through you, though the air is still warm. As you turn back toward the crowd, you catch sight of the old mariner again. This time his gaze isn't fixed on the horizon. It's on the people, scanning faces, as if searching for someone who understands what's coming. You realize he's not just worried about the sea, he's worried about how people will act when they can no longer pretend this is normal. His lips move, almost soundlessly, and though you can't hear the words, you know it's another warning. By early afternoon, the first boats begin to return to the pier. You join a crowd at the docks, eager and uneasy, hoping for some proof that the sea is still what it was yesterday. The first fishing crew that steps ashore moves slowly, their faces pale and unreadable. They carry baskets that should be heavy with the morning's catch, but instead you hear the wet slap of only a few fish inside. When the baskets are tipped, a murmur rolls through the onlookers. The fish are coated in a thick black slime, their scales dulled, their gills heavy and clogged. Smell hits you next, stronger than the sea, sharper than rot. It's a sour metal tang that makes your nose sting and your stomach shift. A few people turn away, pressing sleeves to their faces. One fisherman swears quietly under his breath, kicking at the planks as if that will rid the smell from his boots. The healer, a woman known for her sharp tongue and sharper remedies, steps forward to inspect the fish. She picks one up by the tail, turning it in the light, and then drops it back with a thud. "Don't eat it," she says flatly, "unless you're eager to meet the ancestors sooner than planned." Nearby, a boy who's been cleaning nets pauses, his hands dripping with seawater, to point at the gulls above. Normally they'd be diving for scraps by now, screaming and squabbling. Instead, they circle wide and high, never daring to touch the surface. You follow his gaze and see the hesitation in their movements. the way they angle away whenever the wind shifts toward the black water. The absence of their usual cries makes the harbor feel strangely hollow. Another boat arrives, this one crewed by three brothers. They look shaken, one with a bandage hastily wrapped around his forearm. Their catch is worse, fish with clouded, milky eyes, some still twitching weakly, though the movement is sluggish, unnatural. The slime on them is so thick it strings between your fingers when one of the men demonstrates. He wipes his hand on the dock and mutters about how it doesn't come off no matter how you scrub. You overhear the oldest brother telling someone that their nets felt heavier than they should, as if the water itself had weight. When they hauled them in, the slime poured off like syrup, clinging to every knot and loop. It took them nearly an hour to free the fish, and even then, half slipped back into the water, their bodies limp and boneless. The youngest brother swears he saw one of the fish moving away in a strange spiral, as if pulled by something unseen. A few villagers, stubborn or hungry enough to risk it, take some of the fish home despite the healer's warning. You watch one man wrap his prize in cloth, muttering about not letting good food go to waste. His wife looks less convinced, keeping her hands firmly on her hips as they walk away. Around you, others debate whether the sea is poisoned or simply going through a season. The old mariner's voice cuts through the chatter. The sea doesn't have seasons like that. Not here. As the day wears on, more boats trickle in, each bringing smaller and stranger hauls. Some return empty, the crews unwilling to cast their lines at all after seeing the water's surface move in unnatural patterns. By sunset, the pier smells of salt, fish, and that inescapable sour tang. The piles of blackened fish lie untouched at the edges of the dock, their eyes catching the last of the light in a way that makes you feel watched. Before leaving, you glance back one last time at the harbor. The tide is higher than it should be for this hour, lapping against the pilings with a slow, deliberate rhythm. In the dimming light, the water seems to breathe, not with the easy inhale and exhale of waves, but with a steady living pulse. You wonder if the sea is feeding on something you can't see, and the thought stays with you all the way home. That night, long after the market has gone quiet and the harbor has settled into uneasy stillness, a stranger arrives in the village. His boots are caked with dried mud, his coat worn thin by travel, and his eyes carry the restless gleam of someone who follows storms rather than avoids them. He sets his pack down in the corner of the tavern and orders a drink without glancing at the menu. The room is dim, lit only by the low flicker of oil lamps, and conversations drop to murmurs as the locals notice his arrival. Strangers don't wander here often, especially not during weeks like this. You take a seat at the next table, your cup warm in your hands, and watch as the tavern keeper greets him cautiously. He introduces himself as Aldrich, a naturalist of sorts, though the way he says it suggests his work strays far from polite science. He's heard the rumors about the black tide and has come to see it for himself. The old mariner, seated in the corner with his usual cup of rum, tilts his head toward Aldrich and says, "You've seen this before, haven't you?" The room goes still. Aldrich leans back, studying the faces around him. "Not here," he says slowly, "but yes. Once, in a place where the sea didn't forgive what it touched." He tells of a small island chain far to the south, where the water turned black after a sudden storm. It began the same way. Fish dying, seabirds fleeing, the air thick and strange. Within weeks, the islanders who stayed vanished without a trace. Boats sent to search found nothing but empty houses and the quiet slap of black water against the docks. His story drips into the silence like the sound of rain on stone. Some of the listeners shift in their seats. Others glance toward the door as if considering leaving right then. He goes on, describing how the black water seemed to cling to the hulls of ships, eating into the wood, how nets rotted after a single use, and how even the tides began to move out of rhythm with the moon. Historians are still debating whether it was a natural phenomenon, Aldrich says, his tone dry, or something we weren't meant to name. Someone laughs nervously, trying to cut through the tension, but it doesn't stick. The smell of smoke and salt hangs between the tables, and even the fire in the hearth seems quieter. You notice the old mariner watching Aldrich closely, nodding at details only he seems to recognize. When Aldrich mentions that the water in his story glowed faintly at night, like a sheet of stars beneath the surface, the mariner exhales sharply, as if confirming something he had hoped wasn't true. Aldrich finishes his drink and leans forward, lowering his voice. If it is the same thing, you'll have less time than you think. When the sea turns black, it's not just water you're looking at, it's a living thing. He doesn't elaborate on what he means, and perhaps it's better that way. The words settle deep, heavy as anchor chains. Around you, no one speaks, the weight of the tale pressing against the walls of the small tavern. When he stands to leave, a few follow him outside, eager to hear more. You remain in your seat, staring into the dim light and feeling the faint rumble of the tide through the floorboards. Outside, the sea waits, dark, patient, and closer than it was yesterday. Somewhere in the night, you hear the slow creak of wood against water, as if something is brushing the pier with deliberate care. By dawn, the air feels wrong, too still, too heavy, as if the village is caught in the deep breath before something speaks. You walk to the shore expecting the same slow roll of waves, but instead the sea has pulled back far beyond its usual line. The wet sand stretches for hundreds of yards, glistening under the pale morning light, littered with shells and strands of kelp that look freshly torn. It's the kind of sight that makes your instincts tighten, even if your eyes can't yet explain why. People stand in small clusters, pointing, their voices hushed but tense. Children, freed from their parents' watch for just a moment, sprint toward the exposed seabed. They laugh and call to one another, chasing crabs and picking up starfish with wet hands. You notice how far they go, their small shapes becoming dots against the dark, flat expanse. But beneath the laughter, you see movement. Long, slow shifts beneath the mud, as if something deep below is turning in its sleep. A ripple rolls against the stillness, not from wind, but from something heavier, pushing upward. One fisherman edges forward with a pole, stabbing at the mud where the shapes seem to pass. The pole sinks deeper than it should, almost swallowed whole before he yanks it back. His face drains of color, and without a word he steps backward until the waves are far behind him. No one asks what he felt. They can read it in the way his hands won't stop shaking. Somewhere behind you, a gull cries once, sharp and startled, before winging away inland. The old mariner, who has seen more tides than anyone here, mutters to himself as he watches. "Too far," he says. "It's gone too far." When you ask him what he means, he doesn't answer, just keeps staring at the horizon as if it might swallow the village whole. His boots leave deep prints in the damp sand, but he doesn't move closer. You can tell he's measuring something, though you don't know if it's distance or time. By mid-morning, the waterline has not returned. Normally, the tide would have turned hours ago, bringing the waves back to lap at the shore. Instead, the sea remains stretched thin, revealing things you were never meant to see. A tangle of wrecked nets, a half-buried anchor, and the skeletal ribs of a ship no one in the village remembers losing. Sunlight glints off the wet wood, and for a moment it looks like the ship is breathing, expanding and collapsing with the earth beneath it. The children's laughter fades as their parents call them back, voices sharper now. Some come willingly, carrying their treasures of shells and driftwood. Others resist until they catch sight of the adults' faces. You notice one boy holding a crab that isn't moving, its shell coated in the same black sheen that stained the fish yesterday. His mother takes it from him, drops it without a word, and wipes his hands clean with the edge of her skirt. As the day wears on, the sand begins to crack in the sunlight, deep lines spidering across its surface. From the farthest point you can see, a shimmer spreads, dark, almost metallic, seeping up from below. It looks like water, but it doesn't flow. It sits waiting. A low hum reaches your ears, so faint you think it's in your head, until you see others turning their heads to listen. It's not the sound of waves. It's deeper, slower, like the earth grinding its teeth. When the first wave finally does return, it's not a wave at all. It's a single dark swell, moving without foam, without splash, as if the sea is pushing its weight forward deliberately. It slides over the sand, erasing the cracks, swallowing shells and footprints alike. The mariner whispers something you can't catch, but the way his voice shakes makes you wish you hadn't heard it anyway. The water doesn't stop at the old line. It keeps creeping forward, and you realize it's not returning to its place. It's coming for more. By the following morning, the village wakes to a sound, or rather the absence of one. The usual rush and hiss of the waves has vanished, replaced by a silence so complete you can hear the creak of every rope, the groan of every boat moored offshore. Even the gulls are gone. You step outside and the air feels thick, like it's holding its breath. From where you stand, the bay looks wrong, smooth as glass, reflecting the pale gray sky without a single ripple to break it. A few fishermen are already gathered at the end of the pier, their bodies stiff, eyes fixed on the still water. You join them and notice how the anchored boats have drifted from their lines, pulled together like leaves in a slow current. One man mutters that the tide is acting backwards, though there's no sign of an actual tide at all. It's as if the water has forgotten which way to move. The silence gnaws at you. No gulls, no lapping waves, just the occasional groan of wood under strain. Someone suggests rowing out to take a closer look, and within minutes, a small crew is pushing a skiff into the unnervingly calm bay. You climb aboard, the wood cool and damp beneath your palms. As you move away from the pier, the village begins to shrink behind you, swallowed by the stillness. Every oar stroke is louder than it should be, the splash echoing strangely in the open air. You realize you can hear your own breathing, and so can everyone else. No one says a word. When the skiff reaches the darker part of the water, you notice a strange sheen spreading across the surface. It isn't uniform. Patches of black swirl lazily under the oars, shifting in shapes that never break apart completely. The man rowing beside you dips his blade in deep, then pulls it out slowly. Thick strands of black residue cling to the wood, stretching and snapping before sliding back into the water with a sound like wet cloth. The smell rises instantly, metallic, bitter, almost like blood that's been left too long in the air. The man in the bow reaches over with a long pole and touches the slick. It ripples outward in perfect circles, then stills again in seconds. "It's heavier than it looks," he says quietly, rubbing his fingertips together as if trying to rid himself of the sensation. His expression tightens, and he doesn't touch the water again. Behind him, the old mariner shakes his head, his gaze fixed on the point where the black fades back to blue. "It's not fading," he murmurs. "It's spreading." Further out, the calm becomes unsettling in a different way. You pass over places where the sea seems to swell just beneath the surface, forming slow domes that rise and sink without a sound. Once, you swear you see something pale drifting up toward the light, only to vanish before it reaches the surface. The others see it too. No one mentions it, but everyone grips their oars tighter. The boat feels suddenly smaller than it did when you left the pier. When you finally turn back toward shore, the village looks almost unreal. Too quiet, too still. The bright paint on the houses muted under the gray sky. The only movement is the black water sliding slowly behind you, leaving faint streaks against the boat's wake. By the time you reach the dock, the smell is in your clothes, your hair, your skin. No matter how much you try to shake it off, it lingers, following you like a shadow you can't quite outrun. By late afternoon, the air over the bay changes again, not with the howl of a coming storm, but with something stranger. A low pressure settles in, pressing against your ears, making every sound feel muffled. The sky hasn't darkened, and no clouds gather, yet the surface of the water begins to move as if caught in a restless dream. You stand at the edge of the pier, watching ripples bloom across the black sheen, forming perfect circles that widen slowly and vanish without breaking. People gather behind you, drawn by the movement. They whisper to one another, trying to make sense of the sight. "No wind," someone mutters. "It shouldn't be doing that." The circles keep forming, always in the same places, as if something beneath the surface is pushing upward in a steady rhythm. Each one spreads without sound, breaking against the pilings and leaving behind a faint residue that clings to the wood. The old mariner is there too, leaning on the rail, his knuckles white. "Historians are still debating whether this was natural or not," he says, almost to himself. "I already know my answer. The air feels warmer near the water, a damp heat that makes your skin prickle. You notice the others shifting uncomfortably, rubbing their arms, but no one moves away. Every so often, the circles stop completely, and the bay goes flat again. Too flat, like a mirror stretched too tightly. Then, without warning, a new set of ripples spreads, faster than the last, cutting across the black water in angles that don't match the tide. It's the kind of thing your brain wants to explain but can't, and the not knowing digs in deeper than fear. A boy leans over the side, trying to peer into the shifting patterns, and his father yanks him back sharply. The man's face is pale, his voice tight as he says, "Don't get that close." You can tell he's not worried about the boy falling. He's worried about the water touching him. That unspoken fear hangs over the crowd now, a shared understanding that this isn't just about strange currents. The bay feels aware, as if it knows you're watching. Someone brings a small lantern, holding it out over the edge. The light falls in a soft circle, catching flecks of something drifting just below the surface. At first you think they're bubbles, but they don't move upward. They hover in place, swaying slightly, almost like they're breathing. The light makes them shimmer faintly, and for a heartbeat, it looks like the water is holding its own tiny constellations. Then just as suddenly they scatter, vanishing into the black. The old mariner finally turns away, muttering that he's seen enough. A few others follow him back toward the village, but you stay, rooted to the spot. The circles have slowed again, spreading out into lazy arcs. You find yourself staring at them too long, hypnotized by their perfect edges, until your eyes blur and you blink hard to clear them. It's only then you realize the pier's shadow has shifted. Not because the sun has moved, but because the water beneath you is darker than before. By nightfall, the movement stops completely. The bay lies still under a cloudless sky, reflecting the moon like a sheet of polished stone. You can almost convince yourself the patterns were just a trick of the light, but the smell that clings to your skin says otherwise. When you finally leave the pier, the boards creak under your weight, and you can't help but glance back one last time. The black water waits, silent, patient, and unblinking. That night, the village keeps more lanterns burning than usual, their glow spilling across the narrow streets and out toward the docks. From your window, you can see the bobbing lights of fishing boats anchored farther out. A comfort in the dark, a reminder that some things still stand between the shore and the open sea. You sit there for a while, watching them sway gently, until you notice one light blink out. Not fade, just vanish, as if it had been swallowed whole. At first, you think the crew might have simply put it out, maybe heading back early. But then, another light disappears. Then another. There's no splash, no cry, no sound at all. Only the slow erasure of points of gold against the black water. In minutes, the distant view that was dotted with tiny flames becomes emptier, the spaces between them stretching wider. People begin stepping out of their homes, murmuring to one another, eyes drawn to the horizon like moths to flame. You walk quickly to the docks where a group has gathered. The old mariner is there, his jaw tight. A younger fisherman whispers that his cousin is out there in one of those boats. The words hang in the air, unanswered. Another man insists they should send help, but no one moves to untie a boat. The stillness on the water feels like a warning, and everyone senses that crossing it now would be like stepping off the edge of the world. The council members arrive, faces grim in the torchlight. They argue in low voices at the edge of the pier. Some say the village should be evacuated before sunrise. Others claim leaving will anger the sea and make it follow. The debate grows tense, voices rising, hands gesturing sharply. But every time another lantern vanishes in the distance, the words falter, replaced by uneasy silence. It's hard to argue when the dark keeps taking. The smell of the water is stronger here, as if the black tide is creeping closer under cover of night. You see a slick sheen forming against the pilings, glinting faintly in the torchlight. The tide is high again, but the water moves without the usual rhythm, just a slow, steady climb. It feels as if it's reaching for the dock itself. You take a step back without thinking, and you notice others doing the same. When the last light finally disappears from the bay, there's no reaction from the crowd, just a stillness that feels heavier than fear. No one wants to say out loud what they're all thinking. Somewhere in the dark, the boats are gone, and whatever took them left no trace. The silence that follows feels endless, stretching over the water and into the bones of the village. You leave the docks with the image burned into your mind. An empty bay under a starless sky. The horizon swallowed by a blackness that feels alive. As you walk home, you pass houses where curtains are drawn tight and lamps burn low behind shuttered windows. The streets are quieter than they've ever been, the air heavy with the knowledge that something out there is moving, and it's moving closer. The night begins with a stillness that feels almost merciful after the vanishing lights, but it doesn't last. Not long after midnight, You hear the first scream, sharp and quick, cut short as if swallowed. You rush to the window, and what you see makes your breath hitch. The water has risen past the docks, gliding silently up the narrow lanes between the houses. It moves without waves, without the crash or roar you expect. Instead, it advances like a living shadow, black and smooth, reflecting only the dim glow of lanterns trembling in the windows above. You step outside, the air damp and cold, and join others gathering on the higher slopes. No one shouts. No one runs. The silence is a weight pressing everyone's voices down. The black tide is everywhere, sliding between walls, licking at doorsteps. It leaves behind a slick shimmer on the stone, a skin of oil that catches the moonlight and makes it seem as though the village is sweating. The smell is worse now, thicker, sharper, curling in your nose until you taste it. Some of the older houses closest to the shore are already half submerged, their doors swinging gently on unseen currents. A chair floats past, bumping silently against the wall before disappearing into the black. In one window, you see a cat crouched on the sill, fur puffed, eyes wide and glowing. It doesn't move even when you call softly. The water creeps closer to it, and you turn away before you see what happens next. Children are lifted higher onto shoulders, their small hands gripping tightly at their parents' collars. The old mariner stands apart, his face unreadable. Someone asks him how high it will go, but he doesn't answer. His gaze is fixed on the street where the black water pushes against an uphill slope, pooling, spreading sideways like it's searching for another path. It's not moving with the terrain, it's moving with intent. A few villagers gather buckets as if they could fight the tide the way they would a fire. But when one man dips his bucket into the water, it comes up heavier than it should, the liquid inside moving sluggishly, clinging to the sides. He tries to throw it back, but the residue sticks, stretching like melted wax before sliding into the dirt at his feet. The crowd takes a collective step back. From the hillside, you can see the dark shapes of boats still tethered offshore, their hulls gleaming unnaturally in the moonlight. One shifts slightly as if nudged from below, and then settles again. You wait for the waves to follow, but none do. It's like watching someone breathe without moving their chest. That thought chills you more than the air ever could. The water keeps advancing, inch by inch, until it reaches the base of the slope where you stand. It doesn't crash against the ground. It simply climbs it, hugging every contour. You take a step back, and so does everyone else. Somewhere in the dark, a door breaks from its hinges and drifts past, turning slowly as it's carried away. The sound it makes against the stone is soft but deliberate, like knuckles rapping against a coffin. By the time the black tide finally stops, it's claimed half the village. The streets closest to the docks are gone, swallowed whole. The people who live there are gone too, either moved to higher ground or something else. No one dares to go down and see. The night stretches on, the water holding its ground like it owns it. Above, the stars shine coldly, as if they're watching but won't interfere. The black tide does not retreat with the dawn. When morning comes, the village wakes to a shoreline that has moved inland by almost 50 yards. From the slope where you spent the night, you can see rooftops still protruding from the slick surface, their chimneys leaning at odd angles. The water is calm now, too calm, its surface unbroken except for the occasional ripple that doesn't match the wind. The smell clings to everything, woven into the damp clothes and the wood of the houses. People venture cautiously down the slope, stopping short of the new shoreline. They speak in low voices, their words swallowed by the strange stillness. Someone points out a net tangled in a tree, black slime dripping from its knots. Another finds a cluster of dead fish on the grass, their bodies stiff, their eyes like milk glass. It's hard to tell where the sea ends and the land begins. The edges blur under a sheen that coats everything it's touched. You follow a small group that dares to walk along the water's edge. The ground here is soft, pulling at your boots with every step. In one shallow pool, you see something glinting, black crystals, sharp and wet, embedded in the mud. You crouch to touch one, but the old mariner grips your arm before you can. "Don't," he says, his voice low. "It's not for us." You straighten and step back, uneasy at how certain he sounds. Out in the bay, the anchored boats are gone. No broken masts, no floating debris, just gone. Someone suggests they might have drifted farther out, but another points out there's no wind, no current to carry them. The idea that they simply sank without a sound hangs over the group like a shadow. A child asks where the fishermen are, and no one answers. As the sun climbs higher, the black sheen on the water begins to shimmer faintly, almost like heat haze on a road. You realize it's moving, not outward toward the horizon, but sideways along the shore, as if tracing the shape of the land. The mariner watches it with narrowed eyes, his lips pressed thin. "It's searching," he mutters. You don't ask what he means. You're not sure you want to know. The council meets again, this time in the open air. Voices rise and fall. Some argue for leaving immediately, others refuse to abandon their homes. A few insist that the tide will go back on its own, that it's only a matter of waiting. You notice how those who speak loudest about staying are also the ones who haven't been down to the water's edge yet. They haven't seen the crystals. They haven't heard the hum that still lingers just beneath the silence. By midday, the black tide shifts again, not back toward the sea, but farther inland, spilling into gardens and creeping along the base of fences. It moves slowly, but with the certainty of something that has already decided where it's going. The mariner tells anyone who will listen that the longer it stays, the harder it will be to make it leave. His words are met with tight faces and nervous glances at the horizon, where a faint new line of darkness is forming. When you finally step away from the water, you realize you've been holding your breath. The air inland smells cleaner, but the weight of the tide stays with you. Even when you close your eyes, you can see it, glossy and patient, waiting for whatever comes next. The following morning feels wrong before you even open your eyes. The usual chorus of sounds, the gossip of neighbors, the clink of tools, the distant bark of dogs is missing. When you step outside, the air is so still it feels like a held breath. The black tide hasn't gone anywhere. If anything, it's higher, seeping between buildings that had been spared the night before. It glistens in the pale light, a slow-moving mirror reflecting the emptiness of the village. Those who still remain keep to the higher streets, speaking in short, urgent bursts. You overhear someone saying that 3 more houses down near the shore are now unreachable, their doors sealed shut by the creeping water. Another mutters that he saw something moving under the surface, something large enough to push against a wall before sliding away without a sound. No one argues with him, because no one wants to find out if he's right. You walk toward the edge of the flooded area, careful where you step. The mud here is black, slick, and strange. It clings to your boots like glue. Near what used to be the baker's shop, you see a bench floating lazily in place, turning a slow circle as if caught in a current only it can feel. The smell is worse today, thick and metallic, coating the back of your throat until you can taste it. The old mariner stands nearby, watching the water as though it might speak to him. When you ask if he's seen anything, he nods toward the bay. "Listen," he says. You strain your ears and hear it, a faint, irregular sound, somewhere between a hum and a sigh. It rises and falls without pattern, and the longer you listen, the more it seems to come from beneath your feet rather than from the water itself. "That's not the sea we know," he says quietly. By midday, a group of villagers gathers to take what supplies they can from the lower homes. You join them, wading through ankle-deep water that's warmer than it should be. Inside one house, you find a table set for breakfast, plates untouched, as if the family had simply stood up and walked away mid-meal. In another, you see wet footprints leading from the back door to the edge of the water, where they vanish entirely. One man brings back a bucket full of the black residue scraped from a wall. Under the sunlight, it sparkles faintly, almost beautifully, until someone dips a stick into it and the wood begins to soften, as if rotting from the inside out. No one touches it after that. The bucket is set aside, far from the food and tools, like a thing that needs its own quarantine. In the afternoon, a low mist rolls in from the horizon, though the sky above remains clear. It clings close to the water, curling around corners and slipping into alleys. Through it, the black sheen looks even darker, more solid, as though the tide is gaining weight. You catch yourself staring too long, the haze blurring your focus until you shake your head and step back. By evening, the mist hasn't lifted. Lanterns are lit early, their light bending strangely when it hits the water's surface. You can't shake the feeling that something in the tide is watching from below, patient and deliberate. The mariner says nothing this time. He only stands with his arms crossed, eyes fixed on the thickening dark. That night, the council calls one last meeting in the old church at the top of the hill. Its wooden beams creak with every step, the air inside smelling of wax and salt. The pews are packed. Those who stayed gather with tense faces, their eyes darting to the door whenever the wind shifts outside. You find a place along the back wall, close enough to see the expressions of the speakers, far enough to slip out if you need to. The head councilman clears his throat, his voice tight. "We have until morning," he says. "If the water hasn't gone back by then, we leave." Murmurs rise immediately, some relieved, others furious at the thought of abandoning homes built over generations. A woman stands, her voice sharp. "Leave, and the sea will follow." "You think running will stop it?" The words hang in the air, unanswered. The old mariner pushes himself to his feet, leaning on his cane. When he speaks, the room goes still. "This isn't the first place to see the black tide," he says, "and it won't be the last. But the ones who stayed in those other places, they're not here to tell you how it ends." He pauses, letting the words settle like dust. "If you wait for proof, you'll get it, but not in time to use it." From outside, a muffled sound rolls through the walls, a deep, drawn-out groan, like the shifting of something vast beneath the water. Heads turn toward the windows, but no one moves to look. The mariner keeps speaking, his voice low. "The tide doesn't just take, it keeps, it remembers." You don't understand what he means, but you feel the truth in the way his hands tighten on the cane. Someone bursts through the door, breathless. "He's been down by the new shoreline," he says, and the water has moved again. Fast this time, covering 3 more streets in the last hour. His eyes are wide, his clothes wet up to the knees. "It's not waiting for morning," he says. That's when the first lantern in the church flickers and goes out, though there's no draft to touch it. The councilman makes the decision then and there. Leave before dawn. The order spreads quickly through the crowd. People file out in tense silence, their footsteps loud against the wooden floor. Outside, the air feels heavier, and the black sheen on the water glints faintly in the moonlight. Closer now than it was when the meeting began. As you step away from the church, you look back once more. The building stands tall against the dark, its bell silent. Somewhere in the stillness, you swear you hear the faint hum again, rising from the water, curling around the edges of the night. It sounds almost like a voice, one you hope you never understand. Before the first light of dawn, the village is awake. Doors open and close in hurried bursts. Footsteps echo on the cobblestones, and voices carry low across the still air. You stand on the slope, watching as families pack what little they can carry. Bundles of clothes, sacks of dried fish, tools wrapped in cloth. The black tide waits below, its surface gleaming faintly in the moonlight, closer now than when you last saw it. The council's order is clear. Leave before the water makes leaving impossible. You shoulder a small pack, the weight unfamiliar and awkward. Around you, people are making impossible choices. What to take, what to leave behind forever. A woman cradles a bundle of her grandmother's quilts. A man drags a crate of tools, muttering that they'll need them wherever they end up. In the distance, you hear the faint, rhythmic creak of cartwheels as someone guides a donkey up the hill, its ears flicking nervously toward the bay. The old mariner is already moving toward the inland path, walking with a slow but steady gait. He pauses once, looking back at the water. You notice his hands tighten on the head of his cane, the knuckles white, before he turns and keeps going. You hurry to catch up, but something makes you glance back over your shoulder, and that's when you see it. The water is not just rising, it's advancing. Not in a rush, not in a flood, but in a steady, deliberate crawl. It pours silently into the streets you stood in just days ago, sliding between doorways, swallowing fences. The motion is mesmerizing and wrong all at once, like watching a shadow stretch across the ground when there's no sun to cast it. It doesn't break against walls, it climbs them, wrapping each surface in a skin of black sheen. A child's voice cuts through the murmurs. It's following us. Heads turn sharply, but no one answers. You see the councilman look at the mariner, and for once the old man doesn't deny it. His silence says more than words could. The pace quickens. Bags are hefted higher onto shoulders, carts creak under heavier loads. People who swore they would never leave are now moving without looking back. As you start up the path inland, the sound changes. It's faint at first, a low vibration underfoot, like the earth itself is humming. You feel it through your boots, steady and constant, pulsing in time with the slow advance of the tide. It seems to grow stronger when you look at the water directly, as if it's aware of your attention. You find yourself glancing away, pretending not to notice, though the sound remains in your bones. Halfway up the rise, a man cries out. One of the carts has toppled, its wheel sinking deep into the soft earth. A few rush to help, but their hands slip on the slick mud, black residue smearing their palms. The donkey shies, eyes rolling, refusing to move forward. The mariner orders them to leave the cart, his voice sharper than you've heard it. "If you wait, you won't get another chance," he says. Reluctantly, they abandon it, the crates of belongings spilling into the mud like discarded memories. By the time you crest the hill, the sun is just beginning to break the horizon, painting the distant sea in pale gold. From here, you can see the full spread of the black tide below, an irregular shape that no longer resembles the coastline you once knew. It glints in the light, stretching farther than you imagine, curling inward along the shore like fingers closing into a fist. You turn away from the sight, focusing on the narrow path ahead. Behind you, the tide keeps coming. You can't hear it move, but you know it's there, patient, deliberate, and unwilling to stop until it has taken what it came for. The inland path winds between low hills, the grass still damp with night dew. You walk in a tight line with others, the sound of footsteps and shifting packs filling the silence. Every so often, someone glances back toward the sea, though the curve of the land now hides it from view. The absence of its glimmer feels almost worse. You can't see it, but you know it's there, somewhere behind you, pushing forward. The trail narrows as it passes through a small grove of wind-bent pines. The air here smells cleaner, sharper, but it's still tinged faintly with that metallic bite you can't shake. The trees creak overhead, their branches swaying, though there's no breeze. A child asks his mother why the trees are moving, and she shushes him quickly, her eyes darting upward. You look too, catching the faint shimmer of moisture clinging to the bark. Not dew, but something thicker, darker. Ahead, the path dips into a shallow ravine where a small stream usually trickles over stones. Today, the water is barely moving, as if the current has been stolen. You kneel to scoop some up, but the mariner stops you with a sharp shake of his head. "It's not the same stream you remember," he says. You look closer and see it, tiny black threads drifting through the clear water, twisting like hair caught in the current. They vanish when you blink, but the unease stays. The group slows as the incline steepens, the weight of supplies and fatigue setting in. Two men carry an elderly woman in a chair between them, their steps careful and deliberate. She hums softly, an old song you don't recognize, her eyes fixed on the hills ahead. The sound is oddly steadying, a reminder of something human amid the strangeness. But when she stops humming, the silence rushes back in, heavy and complete. Midway up the next rise, a young man breaks from the group, running up a side path toward a stand of low buildings. He shouts that it's his uncle's farm, that he can't leave without checking. Several call for him to come back, but he doesn't. You watch him vanish into the trees, his voice echoing once, then nothing. Minutes later, a single crow bursts from the branches above the farm, its wings beating hard as it flies inland. The man does not return. When you reach the top of the ridge, you can see a thin column of smoke rising in the distance, far inland. The councilman points toward it, saying there's a village there that might offer shelter. The thought of solid ground, dry homes, and distance from the tide is enough to push the group onward. Still, as you start down the other side, you notice the mariner lingering, his eyes scanning the horizon behind you. The sun is higher now, and for a moment, a faint reflection catches on the far-off hills. Too dark to be water, too still to be shadow. You don't mention it, but you know the mariner saw it too. His jaw is set, and he walks faster to close the distance between you, muttering under his breath. By midday, the path widens, the hills falling away to reveal a stretch of open fields. The smoke from the distant village is thicker now, drifting lazily upward. The air smells of wood fire, warm and familiar, and for the first time in days, you hear the low murmur of voices ahead. People quicken their pace, hopeful, But you can't shake the feeling that something in the rhythm of the march has changed, as if the group is being matched step for step by something you cannot see. The open fields seem like a blessing at first, wide, green, and sunlit, stretching all the way to the next rise. But the space feels wrong after days spent in narrow streets and shadowed slopes. There's no cover here, no shelter from the view of whatever might be behind you. People keep glancing over their shoulders, eyes scanning the horizon for the faintest shimmer of black. You try to focus on the road ahead, but the light breeze carries an unmistakable scent. That faint metallic tang, sharper now, as if the air itself remembers the tide. A few villagers murmur about it, but no one slows their pace. The sound of boots in the grass is constant, steady, and you begin to notice how the group's rhythm falls into an almost perfect cadence. Too perfect, like you're marching to a beat you didn't choose. At the crest of the first hill, you risk a look back. The coastline is still hidden by the rolling land, but the hills behind you seem closer than before. Not just in distance, but in presence, as if they've shifted forward to watch you. You blink, and they are just hills again, dotted with low brush and pale rock. But the feeling doesn't leave. The mariner notices your unease. "It's in the ground now," he says quietly, not looking at you. Once it touches, it doesn't forget. You ask what he means, but he's already moved ahead, his cane sinking slightly into the damp soil with every step. You glance down and see a faint dark stain around each mark, like the earth is drinking something it shouldn't. As the group descends into a shallow valley, the temperature drops. The air feels heavy, as if a storm is close, though the sky above is painfully clear. A line of old stone walls cuts across the valley, half collapsed and covered in moss. When you pass between two of them, you feel the faintest vibration under your boots. A deep, slow thrum, so soft you almost believe you imagined it. But the woman beside you stumbles slightly, pressing a hand to her chest. "Felt that," she mutters, her eyes wide. The valley narrows into a funnel-shaped pass, and the sound changes. It's not a hum anymore. It's more like the sigh of something vast, traveling up through the ground. It's steady, patient, and too deep to be wind. People pick up their pace, the sound pressing at their nerves. One man drops his pack entirely, choosing speed over possessions. No one stops to pick it up. At the far side of the valley, the land rises again, and the group pushes hard up the slope. When you reach the top, your lungs burning, you allow yourself a final look back. For a moment, you think you see it, a faint black shimmer sliding between the folds of the hills, moving without light or shadow. But the wind shifts, and the sight is gone. The mariner reaches the crest beside you, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "It's closer than it looks," he says, his voice flat. "It always is." He doesn't wait for your reply. Instead, he heads down toward the smoke of the inland village, and you follow, though the feeling of being watched stays pressed between your shoulder blades. By late afternoon, the smoke you've been following all day rises thicker, darker, curling lazily into the pale sky. The sight of rooftops appears between the trees, a scattering of houses along a wide dirt road, their chimneys working steadily. Relief ripples through the group, though no one says the word safe out loud. You step onto the main street and immediately notice the smell of wood fire mixed with something else. Sharp, metallic, faint but familiar enough to twist your stomach. The villagers here pause their work to watch your group arrive. They don't smile, but they don't turn you away either. A man with a broad frame and soot-streaked hands steps forward, introducing himself as Thomas, the blacksmith. He listens quietly as your councilman explains the situation in short, clipped sentences. When he hears the words "black tide," his eyes flicker, and he glances toward the river that runs along the far edge of the village. You're led to a large barn where people can rest. The air inside smells of hay and smoke, warm and thick. As you set your pack down, you notice dark stains on the floorboards, old, dried, but still catching the light in a way that reminds you of the sheen on the water. You crouch to touch it, then think better of it. The mariner standing nearby meets your eyes and shakes his head once. Later, you walk the length of the village. It's bigger than yours was, with tidy gardens, sturdy fences, and a watchtower overlooking the river. But the river itself is unsettling, its surface too smooth, the current sluggish. You lean over the bank and see strands of something dark trailing just below the surface, twisting lazily in the flow. They vanish when you blink, leaving only your own reflection. At the edge of the village, you find a group of children playing with a set of carved wooden boats. They float them in a shallow ditch filled with water, racing them from one end to the other. When one boat tips, spilling its tiny passenger into the ditch, the water clings to the figurine longer than it should, dripping in slow, sticky strands. The children laugh and wipe it on the grass, not noticing how it stains the blades a shade darker. That night, the council meets with Thomas and the elders in a candlelit room above the smithy. The conversation is low and urgent, voices rising only when someone insists it can't reach this far inland. The mariner says nothing until they've talked themselves into a loop. Then he leans forward, his voice calm but sharp. It already has. The room falls silent. Outside, the wind carries the faint sound of water moving where it shouldn't. You step into the cool night and follow the sound to the riverbank. The moonlight catches on the surface, revealing faint rings spreading outward from the center of the current. Perfect circles, forming and fading without a breath of wind. You stay there longer than you should, watching them widen and vanish until the mariner's voice cuts through the darkness. Best not to look too long, it notices. You turn back toward the village lights, but the sense of safety you felt on arrival is gone. Somewhere beyond the trees, the black tide is moving, and now you're not sure if you outran it or brought it with you. Morning in the smoke village begins with the clang of the blacksmith's hammer and the low murmur of market voices. At first, it feels almost normal. Fresh bread on the air, the sound of chickens scratching in the dirt, the creak of wagon wheels. But then you notice the river. Its surface is smoother than yesterday, like a sheet of dark glass. No ripples from the wind, no splashes from fish. It just lies there, heavy and still, as if waiting. A few of the locals seem uneasy, their eyes flicking toward the water as they work. You overhear two women at the market stall talking in hushed tones. One says she found her garden flooded this morning, though it's far from the riverbank. The other mentions her well water tasting strange. Like metal, she whispers, glancing around as if the word itself might draw something closer. You don't interrupt, but their voices stick in your head. At the far end of the market, a group gathers near a cart piled with sacks. A man opens one to check the contents, then freezes. The grain inside is clumped together, damp and streaked with black. When he tips the sack, a thin trickle of dark liquid seeps out, staining the dust. The smell is faint but unmistakable. People step back quickly, some covering their noses. Tomas, the blacksmith, mutters something about bad luck traveling faster than people. You wander toward the river, drawn by the stillness. The mariner is already there, standing with his hands clasped behind his back. He doesn't turn when you approach. It's closer than they think, he says quietly. You follow his gaze to where the current bends out of sight. There for just a second, you see it, a faint shimmer moving against the flow, sliding upstream. It disappears so quickly, you almost doubt you saw it at all. A child runs up behind you, tossing a stick into the water. It floats for a moment, then stops abruptly, caught on something unseen beneath the surface. The stick tilts, slowly pulled under without a splash. The child stares, then shrugs and runs off. But you stay rooted to the spot, your skin crawling. By midday, the council from your village meets with the elders here. Voices are low, but you catch fragments. Containment, temporary stay, river watch. The mariner doesn't sit with them. He leans in the doorway, watching the river through the gap in the buildings. Every so often, his jaw tightens, but he says nothing. That night, as the village settles into sleep, the sound comes back. That deep, low hum you felt in your bones days ago, now faintly audible in the air. You lie awake in the barn, staring at the rafters, listening as it rises and falls. No one else seems to notice, or maybe they do and are pretending not to. When it finally fades, you close your eyes, but the memory of it lingers, heavy as the dark water waiting beyond the edge of the lamplight. By the next morning, the river no longer pretends to be ordinary. Its color has deepened overnight, shifting from the brown-green of fresh water to a shadowed black that swallows light instead of reflecting it. When you approach the bank, you can see your own face in the surface, but the reflection is off. Darker eyes, a sharper jaw, a version of you that doesn't blink when you do. You step back without meaning to, The villagers gather in uneasy clusters along the bank. Thomas the blacksmith stands with arms crossed, jaw tight. "It's feeding upstream," he says to no one in particular. "That's why it came here." His words ripple through the crowd like a cold wind. The mariner steps forward, scanning the current with the slow patience of someone counting heartbeats. Then he points to a patch in the center of the river where the water swirls in a tight spiral. "There," he says, "it's breathing." A fisherman decides to test it. He tosses a weighted net into the spiral, letting it sink. When he pulls it back, the ropes are slick and heavy with black residue. Several of the knots are frayed as if eaten through, the fibers soft under his fingers. He drops the net on the dirt, cursing under his breath. A murmur of fear spreads through the onlookers, and the crowd begins to drift back toward the safety of the main road. By midday, the changes spread beyond the river itself. Chickens refuse to drink from open troughs, pacing and pecking at the dry ground instead. The cows stand still in their pens, ears twitching, staring at the river without blinking. Even the dogs stay close to their owners' doors, tails low, refusing to wander. A strange quiet settles over the village. No bird calls, no rustle of small animals in the grass. You find yourself back at the water's edge, despite every instinct telling you to stay away. The hum is there again, faint but steady, and this time it's joined by another sound. Soft, intermittent clicks, like stones knocking together far below the surface. The mariner appears beside you without a sound, his shadow falling over the water. "It's marking the banks," he says. You ask what that means, but he doesn't answer, only walks away toward the watchtower. As night falls, the spiral in the river widens, its center darker than the rest. Lantern light bends strangely over it, the reflection warped and stretched. You stand on the bank with a few others, each of you pretending you're just there to watch the current. But when a small log drifts into the spiral and vanishes without a ripple, no one pretends anymore. One by one, people leave, until only you remain, staring at the spot where the log went under. When you finally turn to head back to the barn, the hum follows you up the road. It's quieter than your footsteps, but it matches your pace exactly, as though it wants you to know it's coming too. The watchtower stands at the far edge of the village, a tall, weathered structure built to watch for forest fires, and in harsher years, raiders. Now it has only one purpose: to watch the river. You climb the narrow steps with the mariner leading the way, his cane tapping against each plank. The higher you go, the more the village falls away beneath you, replaced by the endless dark ribbon of water cutting through the land. From up here, the river's transformation is undeniable. It's no longer just a line of black. Its edges shimmer faintly, like oil on glass, stretching beyond the banks into the soil itself. In some places, the sheen snakes out into the fields, glinting between rows of crops. The mariner leans heavily on the railing, scanning the upstream bend. "It's faster than I thought," he mutters. "Too fast." You take the old spyglass, mount it on the railing, and train it toward the spiral in the river. What you see makes your breath catch. Beneath the surface, something is moving. Not a single shape, but many, rolling over one another in slow, deliberate patterns. You can't tell if they're solid or liquid, only that they shift with the same rhythm as the hum you've been hearing for days. You lower the spyglass, and the mariner's expression tells you he saw enough without it. Below, Thomas arrives at the tower's base, waving sharply for the mariner to come down. A council meeting is starting early, which is never a good sign. You follow the mariner down the stairs, feeling the wood shiver faintly under your boots. At the bottom, Thomas mutters, "It started taking things in daylight." His eyes flick toward the river, and you don't ask what he means. You know it's better to see for yourself than to hear it secondhand. At the meeting, the elders argue over whether to block the river with debris, to slow whatever's coming. The mariner laughs once, bitterly. "You can't block it," he says. "You can only get ahead of it." His words don't sit well. Several people leave the room altogether, muttering about superstition, but you can see it in Thomas's face. He believes. That evening, you return to the tower alone. The sun is low, casting long shadows over the water. You lean on the railing, watching the spiral widen, listening to the hum rise just enough to reach your chest. For a moment, you think you see something break the surface, a pale curve, gone before you can decide if it was bone or stone. The water closes over it without a ripple, and the hum dips lower, almost satisfied. When you finally climb down, the air feels heavier, as though the tower is now holding something with it. You glance back once before walking away. In the fading light, the top platform seems darker than the rest of the wood, as if the shadow up there isn't from the setting sun at all. It begins just after midnight, when most of the village is asleep. You're awake in the barn, listening to the faint hum threading through the night air, when a single sharp shout breaks the quiet. You sit up instantly, heart pounding, and hear footsteps rushing past outside. By the time you reach the door, several villagers are already running toward the riverbank, lanterns swinging in their hands. You follow them, the damp grass cold under your feet. At the water's edge, Thomas is standing rigid, his jaw clenched. 2 men, he says, his voice flat. They were on watch. He doesn't need to finish. The crowd looks at the empty bank where the watch post stood, a patch of trampled grass and a half-toppled stool, the only signs anyone had been there. The river is perfectly still, the spiral in its center almost gentle in the moonlight. Someone swears it must have been raiders, but the mariner shakes his head. Raiders don't leave no sound, he says quietly. Raiders don't pull you under without a splash. His words send a ripple through the crowd, and suddenly everyone is holding their lanterns closer, as if the extra light could push back the water itself. A woman points downstream, where something small bobs on the surface. 2 men wade in to retrieve it, returning with a boot slicked in black residue. The leather is soft, almost rotten to the touch, though it couldn't have been in the water more than an hour. The owner's name is still carved into the sole. No one says it out loud. The council meets on the riverbank, their faces pale in the lantern glow. There's talk of moving the entire village farther inland, of leaving before the tide comes all the way. Others argue that it's too late, that the black water is already here in ways they can't see. The mariner stands apart, staring at the spiral as if counting its turns. You watch him, wondering what he's measuring, and whether the number will matter to anyone once it's reached. By dawn, the missing men have not returned. The river looks the same as it did the day before, but now every shadow on its surface feels like an absence. Every ripple, a question you don't want answered. People move slower, speaking less, their eyes drawn again and again to the bank. The hum is louder in the morning light, though no one mentions it. It feels as if the whole village is waiting, not for rescue, but for the next thing the tide decides to take. That night, when the lanterns are lit, you notice gaps where watchmen should be standing. Some posts are empty because there aren't enough willing to fill them. Others are empty because no one will go near the water now, not even with a crowd. From your window, you can see the spiral widening, its center dark enough to swallow the moon's reflection entirely. And somewhere deep in the current, you think you hear it. Soft, deliberate, almost like a voice calling from below. The next morning starts with a scream. You're halfway to the market when the sound cuts through the air, sharp enough to stop you mid-step. People are already running toward the riverbank, their faces pale before you even hear what happened. By the time you push through the crowd, you see the gap where 2 boats had been tied the day before. The ropes hang loose in the water, frayed ends dripping with black residue. No one saw them go. No one heard a thing. Thomas stands near the edge, jaw clenched, his hand tight on the haft of a hammer. That's 3 in 2 days, he says, not looking at you. The mariner's already there too, his eyes following the current like he's reading it. It's faster now, he murmurs. It's learning. The words make a few people glance his way sharply, but no one asks him to explain. A fisherman wades in to pull up one of the ropes, but the water seems to grab at him, the current sticking to his legs longer than it should. He jerks free, stumbling back onto the bank, his trousers coated in a sheen that glistens dark even in the morning light. He doesn't speak, just strips them off and leaves them in the mud, walking away barefoot. By mid-morning, the market has thinned to half its usual size. Stalls that stood near the river are empty, their tables overturned or packed away. A few merchants whisper about moving to higher ground, but others mutter that there's no point. The tide will come whether you're here or there. The tension wraps around the village like fog, thick and heavy, making every word feel too loud. Later, you walk past the watchtower and see one of the guards leaning out over the rail. He's tossing small stones into the water, watching them vanish without a splash. You ask why he's doing it, and he shrugs. I just want to see if it notices. You can't tell if he's joking. By evening, the hum has changed. It's louder now, pulsing in a way that seems to match your heartbeat. You feel it in your ribs, steady and deep, like something is speaking in a language your body understands, even if your mind refuses to. The mariner catches you standing there, frozen, and puts a hand on your shoulder. "Don't let it set the rhythm," he says. "That's how it keeps you." You want to ask what he means, but his eyes are fixed on the dark spiral widening in the river, and you decide not to break his focus. That night, people bar their doors earlier than usual. Lantern light glows behind shuttered windows, casting long, thin shadows across the road. From your bed in the barn, you can hear the river moving. Not splashing, not rushing, just moving, like something walking just outside your door. The next day, a group of farmers comes into the village at first light, their clothes streaked with mud. They've left their tools in the fields and carried nothing back but the news. Half the lower crops are gone. Not trampled, not cut, just gone. The soil where they stood is wet and black, slick underfoot like the riverbank. No footprints, no signs of animals, only the faint smell of rust on the wind. Curiosity drags you out to see for yourself. The fields spread wide beyond the last houses, rows of corn and barley fading into the hills. But halfway out, the ground changes. The dirt darkens, and each step leaves a damp print that glistens faintly in the morning sun. In the center of the field, a long, shallow depression cuts through the crops in a perfect curve, as if something wide and heavy slid across the land without breaking the stalks at the edges. The mariner crouches at the edge of the mark, pressing his palm flat to the soil. When he pulls it back, his skin is stained with the same sheen you've seen on the water. "It's not staying in the river," he says quietly. "It's looking for other ways through." You notice how the farmers shift uneasily at his words, avoiding each other's eyes. By midday, the village forms a work crew to salvage what they can from the untouched plots. People move quickly, glancing over their shoulders toward the blackened patches as if expecting them to spread while they watch. A boy carrying a sack of grain trips and spills part of it on the ground. When he bends to scoop it up, the kernels stick to his hands in a thin, oily film. His mother wipes them clean with the hem of her skirt, not saying a word. Thomas spends the afternoon hammering new boards over the low openings in his workshop, muttering that it's to keep the draft out. But you see how he nails each one tight, sealing them as if they're meant to hold something back, not keep air in. The sound of his hammer echoes across the emptying streets, sharp against the hush that settled over the village. That night, you walk the edge of the fields under a thin moon. The air is still, the rows of crops shifting only in the faintest breeze. Then you hear it, a soft, wet sliding sound, just ahead, between the stalks. You freeze, straining to see movement in the dim light. The sound stops. When you step forward, the soil under your boot feels warmer than the air around it. You don't linger. By the time you reach the first houses again, the smell of rust is stronger, clinging to your clothes like smoke. It starts just after sunset, when the sky is still bruised with the last light of day. You're walking back from the far edge of the village when you see lanterns moving in the distance. 3 of them, swinging in a slow rhythm along the riverbank. At first you think it's the watchmen making their rounds, but the lights are heading toward the narrow wooden bridge that crosses to the opposite shore. The mariner spots them too, his eyes narrowing. "No one's supposed to be out there after dark," he mutters, already moving toward the bank. You follow, your steps quickening as the figures reach the bridge. Their shapes are vague in the lantern glow. 2 men, 1 woman, all walking with a strange, unhurried pace. They don't speak, don't look around, just keep moving toward the far side. Halfway across, the hum starts again, deep and low, rising from somewhere beneath the planks. The lantern light shivers, the glass trembling as though to the beat of that sound. You call out, but they don't turn. The mariner shouts next, louder, the kind of voice meant to cut through a storm. Still no reaction, until the woman steps wrong and 1 foot slips between the planks. The river moves before you can even blink. A dark swell rises beneath the bridge. Not like a wave, but like something pressing upward. It touches the wood, and the hum spikes in your chest. The woman doesn't scream. She just drops the lantern, and it falls silently into the black. The light dies before it hits the surface. The 2 men reach for her, but their hands jerk back as if the boards burn them. The mariner grabs a rope from the bank, tossing it toward them, but it falls short. The swell spreads out in perfect circles, wider and wider, until the entire bridge seems to sag under its weight. Then, with a suddenness that makes your stomach lurch, all three figures are simply gone. The lanterns remain on the bridge, swaying gently in the evening air. No one moves for several seconds. The hum fades back to its usual steady thrum, and the river looks like it did before. Calm, still, hiding everything it's just taken. The mariner picks up one of the abandoned lanterns, holding it at arm's length as though it might bite. "It's not supposed to cross," he says almost to himself. "Not unless it's calling something over." By the time you walk back into the village, word has already spread. People bar their doors tighter, their eyes fixed on the direction of the bridge. You lie awake for hours, the image of the empty lanterns burning in your mind. Somewhere in the dark, you think you hear the faint creak of wood, as if something heavy is still moving across to your side. The next morning, the village wakes to whispers. You follow the sound of hushed voices to the far end of the main street, where a crowd has gathered outside a small house. At first, you think it's another disappearance, but then you see it, the door. From the threshold to halfway up the frame, it's stained with a black sheen that glistens faintly in the pale light. The wood looks damp, though the air is dry. Thomas pushes through the crowd, running his fingers just above the surface. "It didn't break in," he says. "It just marked it." The mariner steps forward, cane tapping once against the stones. "It's claiming," he says quietly. No one asks what happens after a place is claimed. No one wants the answer. The family who lives there, 2 parents and a little girl, stand off to the side, clutching a bundle of clothes and a single cooking pot. They say they heard nothing in the night, no knock, no footsteps, no water. They just woke to find the mark. The mother swears the sheen wasn't there when she opened the door at dawn to let the cat out. The cat hasn't come back. By midday, the council meets in the barn to argue about what to do. Some want to burn the house down, saying it will stop whatever's spreading. Others argue that fire will only make it worse. The mariner sits in the back, silent, until the shouting dies down. "It's not about the wood," he says finally. "It's about the line. Once it draws one, it keeps going." When you pass the house again that evening, the mark seems higher, just an inch or two, but enough to notice. The family has already left, taken in by relatives across the fields. Their windows are shuttered and the doors barred, but the sheen clings to the grain like it belongs there. You can't help glancing at your own door when you return to the barn. That night, you dream of standing in front of that house. The black sheen stretches up the frame, over the roof, dripping down the walls until it covers everything. In the dream, you open the door and find nothing inside. Not even darkness, just a kind of emptiness that pulls at your chest. You wake with the smell of rust in your nose and the sound of water against stone in your ears. When you step outside for air, the street is silent. But in the distance, somewhere toward the river, you see a faint shimmer where no light should be. It's enough to make you step back inside and close the door. You don't check it for marks, not yet. By late afternoon, the hills beyond Lisbon look like they've been taken over by a strange patchwork army. Bits of canvas, sails, market awnings, and even ripped up bed sheets have been stretched between poles, lashed to tree trunks, or draped over crates to form makeshift tents. From a distance, the hillside glitters in uneven patches, some cloth still bright from dye, others dull and soot-streaked, each piece telling you exactly where it came from. The city has emptied upward, and now the hills are alive with the sounds of hammers, rope knots tightening, and the murmur of hundreds trying to make a place to exist. The ground here is uneven, but no one complains. Any slope or hollow that's clear of loose rock becomes a potential home. Families stake claims with whatever boundaries they can find. A line of overturned baskets, a circle of stones, even the shadow of a large tree. Children run between the half-built shelters, carrying messages or scavenged bits of fabric, their bare feet stirring the dust. Every so often, a sharp gust of wind threatens to lift a tent straight off the hillside, sending its owners scrambling to hold it down. Near the crest, you see a large shelter made from what must have been an enormous ship's sail. The fabric still carries the faint smell of salt and tar, and the edges ripple like a flag in the breeze. Beneath it, a group of women sit on blankets, mending clothes and talking in low voices. One hums a lullaby while threading a needle, her voice steady despite the chaos below. The song drifts outward, threading itself through the flapping of canvas, and the occasional clang of a hammer. Elsewhere, men work together to raise taller structures using salvaged beams. They wedge the supports deep into the earth, testing each one with a solid shove before tying the fabric overhead. The ropes are scavenged from docks, from market stalls, even from beds torn apart in the rush to flee. The knots are messy, but they hold. One man stands back to admire his handiwork and mutters something about it being earthquake-proof, drawing a tired laugh from the others. In between the tents, small fires burn in shallow pits, the smoke rising in pale ribbons toward the darkening sky. People cluster around them to boil water or heat what food they've managed to keep. The smell of charred bread and salted fish drifts downwind, mixing with the sharper scent of fresh pine from hastily cut support poles. At night, these fires will become the new street lamps, dotting the hillsides with tiny circles of light. There's no privacy here, no real separation between one family and the next. Conversations bleed into each other, and disputes over space are settled quickly. No one wants to draw too much attention. Still, there's a strange comfort in the closeness. You hear strangers calling each other by name after only a few hours of acquaintance, offering scraps of food or helping to tie down a sagging corner of canvas. Disaster has made neighbors out of everyone. From your spot partway up the slope, you can see the city below, still hazy with smoke. The streets look quiet from this distance, but you know that beneath the calm exterior, there's movement. Rescuers digging, fires smoldering, walls leaning in ways that promise future collapses. Up here, the hills feel safer, but not untouched. The ground still trembles now and then, making the tent poles creak and the fires hiss as embers shift. As night falls, the hills come alive with a different kind of noise. Soft voices, the rustle of fabric, the occasional burst of laughter. It's not the life Lisbon knew yesterday, but it's life all the same. And for now, these uneven slopes and patched-together shelters will be the city's new walls. Down near the base of the hills, where the ground levels out into a wide strip of open dirt, a different kind of work is underway. Merchants, faces still smudged with soot, clothes torn from the day's chaos, are already rebuilding their market stalls. Not from fresh lumber, but from the bones of wrecked ships that the river has spat back onto shore. Long planks still smell of brine and pitch, some bearing scorch marks from the fires that reach the docks. Nails are pulled from twisted frames and hammered back into place with whatever tools can be borrowed or improvised. One man balances on an overturned crate, holding a timber steady while his son hammers at the base. The boy's swing is too wide, the nail bending sideways with a dull ping, but no one scolds him. They just pull it free, straighten it on a rock, and try again. The work is slow, but the rhythm is steady. Lift, place, hammer, repeat. Each stall begins as a crude skeleton, nothing more than a rectangle of beams. But even that outline draws curious eyes from passers-by. A fishmonger you recognize from before the quake is assembling his counter from a ship's broken mast. The wood is too curved to fit cleanly, so he props it at an angle and declares it artistic. His hands move automatically, muscle memory guiding the placement of each board. Beside him, a woman lays out a strip of sailcloth for a roof, weighing the edges down with chunks of stone. "It'll keep the sun off if nothing else," she says, tugging it tight. Not everything is built to sell goods. One stall goes up purely to store salvage, a jumble of tools, rope, and barrels too heavy to carry farther uphill. Another becomes a place for boiling water, the steam rising from a battered copper pot perched over a ring of stones. People stop to warm their hands over it, grateful for the heat even without tea or soup inside. The merchants don't chase them away. They know warmth is a currency of its own right now. The smell of sawdust and salt water hangs in the air, mingling with the faint odor of tar from the ship timbers. Every so often, the sound of hammering is joined by the creak of a plank being forced into place, or the rasp of a saw biting into damp wood. It's not the chorus of a normal market day, but it has the same kind of promise. Noise that means something is being built, something will exist tomorrow that doesn't exist today. Children wander between the half-finished stalls, fingers trailing along the rough wood. One girl finds a carving on a plank, letters in a language she doesn't know, and asks her father what it means. He shrugs, says it was probably the ship's name, then nails the plank into place without another word. The carving will stay there, a silent reminder that this stall once crossed an ocean before it came here. By late afternoon, the row of makeshift stalls cast long shadows across the dirt. They're crooked, uneven, and patched in ways no carpenter would approve of, but they stand. The merchants lean on their counters, surveying their work with a tired sort of pride. Tomorrow, or maybe the next day, goods will fill these spaces again. Bread, fish, cloth, whatever can be found. For now, the timber and nails are enough. It's not just about selling, it's about proving that commerce, like the city itself, can claw its way back from the water and the fire. In the middle of all this rebuilding, one stall stops you in your tracks. Not because it's better built than the others, but because of what's on the counter. A row of small clay pots, each sealed with wax, lined up neatly like precious ointments. The merchant, a wiry man with a sunburned face and a salesman's grin, catches your eye and waves you over. "Protection from the sun," he says proudly, tapping one of the pots. You expect olive oil, maybe beeswax mixed with herbs. Then he adds crocodile dung, finest in Lisbon. For a moment you think he's joking, but no one else laughs. The man lifts a lid and holds it under your nose. The smell hits first, earthy, sour, with a strange tang that makes you take a step back. He nods seriously. "The Egyptians used it. Keeps the skin cool. Stops the burning." He gestures toward the hills where people are pitching tents under a merciless sun. "Better than roasting like a chicken," he adds, as if that seals the deal. You watch as a woman hesitates, then hands over a small coin for a pot. She dips 2 fingers in, smears the paste across her cheeks, and winces. Not from pain, but from the smell. Still, she nods in satisfaction, muttering something about it being cheaper than a wide-brimmed hat. The merchant beams, clearly delighted to have a satisfied customer. He tells her to reapply every time the sun moves a hand's width, which sounds more like a superstition than medical advice. The odd thing is, business isn't bad. Word spreads quickly, and soon a small line forms. People lean in to sniff, grimace, and then, more often than not, buy. Whether they actually believe it works or just want to try something ancient and strange, you can't tell. A man jokes that if it doesn't stop sunburn, it'll at least keep everyone else far enough away not to notice. The merchant laughs too, but doesn't deny it. He shows you his stock room, which is just a wooden crate filled with more clay pots. Each is marked with a scratch symbol that he claims means blessing of the Nile. Whether that's true or just good marketing, it gives the little jars a sense of mystery. He says he traded for the supply weeks ago, never expecting it to become his best-selling item after the quake. "Hard times make people try a strange thing," he shrugs. As you step away, you catch sight of 2 children smearing the paste on each other's arms, giggling and pretending to be crocodiles. Their mother shakes her head but doesn't stop them, maybe because it's the first time they have laughed all day. The smell drifts after you as you walk on, mingling with the sharper scent of tar and wood from the other stalls. It's a ridiculous detail in the middle of so much ruin, but it sticks with you. In a city rebuilding from fire, water, and stone, someone is making a living selling jars of crocodile dung, and people are buying. Maybe it's survival, maybe it's hope, or maybe it's just proof that even when the ground won't stop shaking, human beings will still find a way to set up shop. At the far end of the hillside camp, away from the noisy bustle of the market stalls, a small group sits hunched over makeshift tables, planks balanced on barrels, weighted down with stones to keep the wind from stealing their work. These aren't merchants or laborers, they're engineers, draftsmen, and a few architects who managed to escape the city with their tools. Their hands are stained with charcoal, their sleeves rolled up, eyes fixed on large sheets of paper covered with careful lines and numbers. One man uses a ruler to mark out a series of rectangles, muttering about modular designs to the woman beside him. She nods, then sketches a pattern of diagonal braces inside each rectangle, explaining how they will keep the walls from folding in the next time the ground moves. Another draws a grid for foundations, noting that shallow trenches and flexible joints might absorb shock better than rigid stone. The words earthquake-proof are never spoken out loud, but they hang in the air like a promise. People wander over to watch, drawn by the novelty of seeing something being built on paper before it's built in the dirt. The engineers answer questions patiently, though some of the explanations sail right over their audience's heads. They talk about load distribution, tensile strength, and the way roofs can be made lighter without leaking. One woman suggests incorporating shipbuilding techniques. After all, ships survive storms by flexing with the waves. A young apprentice scribbles the idea down in the corner of his sketch. The tools are primitive, straight edges cut from salvaged wood, compasses made from bent wire, even pencils sharpened with knives. But the drawings take shape with surprising speed. You watch as one plan evolves from a simple square into a sturdy little house with evenly spaced windows, a sloped roof, and walls reinforced by timber frames. It's nothing like the grand stone facades that crumbled in the quake. It looks lighter, smarter, almost humble. Occasionally, the group stops to consult a small stack of books, dog-eared volumes rescued from an office or library. The pages are smudged with soot, but the diagrams inside are clear enough to copy. One engineer sketches from memory, explaining that he studied building methods in far-off colonies where tremors were common. They build for the ground they stand on, he says, not for the sky they hope to reach. A few children sit cross-legged nearby, watching the pencils dance across the paper. One boy asks if the new houses will fall down too. The woman with the diagonal braces smiles gently and says, "Maybe not. That's the point of trying. It's not a promise, just a possibility, but it's enough to make the boy nod and keep watching." As the sun dips lower, the wind catches one of the finished sketches and tries to pull it from the table. The man with the ruler slaps a hand over it, then weighs it down with a stone. He grins at the near miss, rolling the sheet carefully before tucking it into a canvas tube. Each drawing is treated like gold, something portable, unburnable, and capable of shaping the city's future. When you walk away, you glance back to see them still bent over their work, the fading light turning their papers golden. In a day filled with ruin, the sight of a line becoming a wall, a roof, a home, feels like a kind of rebellion. They're not just sketching buildings. They're sketching the idea that Lisbon can stand again, this time on legs that won't give way so easily. The fog rolls in before sunrise, thick enough to blur the edges of the houses and swallow the road beyond a few paces. You wake to the sound of bells, 3 slow strikes from the watchtower, and the low shuffle of people moving toward the center of the village. By the time you step outside, the fog has coated your clothes in a cold, damp layer, and the air smells faintly of wet iron. The council stands near the square's old oak tree, their lanterns glowing dull in the mist. Thomas is there, his voice low and urgent as he explains to anyone who will listen. The watchtower spotted lights on the river during the night. Not lanterns, pale, flickering glows that moved against the current. The mariner adds, "They weren't drifting. They were looking." His words sink into the crowd like stones into deep water. As the fog thickens, strange shapes appear along the edges of vision. Fence posts that look like figures, branches that seem to reach. Every few minutes, a sound rises from somewhere within the mist, a single long tone, low and steady, that vibrates in your ribs. The first time you hear it, you think it's the watchtower's horn, but the guards shake their heads. "That's not ours," one mutters, gripping his spear tighter. Drawn by the sound, you walk toward the edge of the square, where the fog is heaviest. The hum is louder here, layered with faint clicks, like pebbles tapping together underwater. For a moment, the mist parts just enough for you to see something out past the riverbank. A line of faint lights, evenly spaced, swaying gently. Then the fog closes again, and they're gone. The mariner appears beside you, his face unreadable. "It's marking the way," he says. "Fog hides the line until it's ready." You don't ask what happens when the line is complete. Instead, you turn back toward the square, where the others are already lighting more lanterns, as if a little extra light might push back whatever's creeping closer. By midday, the fog hasn't lifted. People move through the village like shadows, their outlines bending in the haze. At one point, you see a figure standing alone near the barn, watching you. When you step closer, the shape dissolves into the mist, leaving only the damp scent of rust in its place. That night, the sound returns, low, steady, deliberate. This time, it feels closer. By the time the fog begins to thin the next morning, the village feels smaller, as if the world beyond the first row of houses has shrunk. People move carefully, speaking in low voices. Then a shout goes up from the northern path, and you join the rush toward it. In the wet dirt just beyond the last house are footprints, rows of them, leading in from the open fields. At first glance, they might be human, but the shape is wrong. The toes are too long, the arch too deep, and each print has a faint groove through the center, like something dragged along as it moved. Worse, the prints don't show the weight of someone walking in. They show no weight at all, as if they were pressed into the ground without anything standing there. The mariner studies them for a long moment, then crouches to touch the edges. His fingertips come back damp, coated in a sheen that catches the light like wet ink. "It's not just in the water anymore," he says, his voice low. "It's here." The trail winds between houses, looping without pattern, pausing at doorways, circling wells, doubling back toward the fields. One set of prints stops directly in front of the barn where you've been sleeping, then turns away again. You feel the air on your neck grow colder as you realize how close it came. By midday, the fog is gone, but the prints remain, darkening as the ground dries. Children are ordered to stay inside, though you catch sight of a few peering from windows, eyes wide. Tomas scatters ash over the deepest impressions, muttering about keeping it from finding the path again. The mariner doesn't stop him, but you can tell from his expression that it won't make a difference. In the evening, as the sun drops behind the trees, you notice something the others haven't. Small droplets of water beside some of the prints, evenly spaced, as if they fell from something being carried. The drops glisten for a moment longer than they should before sinking into the dirt. You watch one disappear completely, leaving no mark at all, and suddenly you're not sure which is worse, the thing that left the prints or the thing that left those drops. That night, you lie awake in the barn, listening for footsteps that may not make a sound. The next day, Thomas doesn't open his forge. Instead, he stands outside with a bundle of tools wrapped in cloth, handing them quietly to anyone who passes. Hammers, chisels, lengths of chain, things meant to fix or hold or break. When you ask why, he shakes his head. "It's not for building," he says. "It's for when the water comes here." Word spreads that Thomas went to the riverbank before dawn and came back pale, his hands trembling. He won't say exactly what he saw, but you hear fragments from those who spoke to him. Something about shapes moving along the bottom, the way their outlines bent like shadows in deep water. One man claims Thomas saw a face, but the blacksmith doesn't confirm or deny it. He just keeps handing out tools until the cloth bundle is empty. By midday, he calls the council and the mariner to the forge. You linger nearby, pretending to check the door hinges until you can hear. Tomas speaks low and fast, telling them that the hum in the river has changed. It's faster, more urgent. "It's like it's counting down," he says. The mariner doesn't laugh or scoff. He simply nods as if this is something he's been expecting. After the meeting, Thomas nails a heavy plank across the inside of his workshop door. You notice he's not the only one. Several houses on the main street start reinforcing their frames, sealing windows with boards, even blocking chimneys. The sound of hammers echoes through the village long after the sun starts to set. In the evening, you find Thomas in the square, staring toward the river. "You think we can hold it back?" you ask. He glances at you, eyes tired. "You don't hold back the tide," he says. "You just hope it takes longer to reach you." That night, the hum is so loud you can feel it through the floorboards. It's no longer just a sound. It's in the wood, in the air, in your bones. You dream of standing at the water's edge, and Thomas is beside you, holding a hammer that drips with something dark. When you wake, the sound is still there, steady and patient, as if it never left. It happens in the middle of the night. You wake to the faint creak of wood somewhere outside the barn, the kind of sound that makes you think of someone shifting their weight on a porch step. At first, you tell yourself it's the wind, until you hear the mariner's cane tapping across the yard, slow and deliberate. You sit up, peering through the gap in the wall. He's standing in front of a house near the square, the one belonging to a young couple who'd only moved here last spring. Even in the dim moonlight, you can see it. A wide smear of black sheen stretched across the door, higher than the mark you saw weeks ago in the first village. It glistens wetly, almost pulsing, and the air around it feels heavier, as if the night itself is leaning in to listen. The couple steps outside, confusion written on their faces. The mariner doesn't let them speak. "Leave," he says, his voice like stone. "Right now. Don't take anything from inside." They hesitate, looking back at the door, but the way his eyes fix on them leaves no room for argument. Within minutes, they're walking toward Thomas's workshop, a small bag each in hand. By dawn, the story has spread. The second mark is larger, darker, and edged with faint lines that curl outward like roots. Thomas examines it from a distance, refusing to get closer. "It's not just claiming anymore," he says. "It's growing." The council meets briefly and orders the house sealed, but no one volunteers to do it. In the end, the mariner boards it up himself, driving each nail with steady, deliberate blows. All day people avoid the square. The mark is visible from the far end of the street, and some swear they can smell the metallic tang on the air, even when they're not near it. By evening, the windows of the neighboring houses are shuttered tight, and no one walks alone. That night, you pass the square on your way back to the barn. The moonlight catches the mark just right, and for a split second, you think you see your own reflection in it, distorted, stretched, the eyes too dark. You blink, and it's gone, but the hum that follows you the rest of the way feels like it's keeping pace with your heartbeat. By the next morning, the village wakes to a sound it hasn't heard in weeks: silence from the river. No hum, no clicking, not even the faint sigh of water moving past the banks. You walk down with the others and see why. The river has dropped, its surface pulled back to reveal wide strips of blackened mud along each side. At first, relief flickers across a few faces, but it fades as soon as they notice the mud is still moving. Slow, deliberate, in long, thin ripples. Thomas squats at the edge, picking up a clump in his gloved hand. The sheen is still there, clinging to the mud like it's part of it now. "It's not leaving," he says. "It's just hiding lower." The mariner nods, eyes scanning the exposed banks. "Sometimes it pulls back so you'll follow," he warns, "and then it takes you where it wants." Despite his words, a few fishermen wade into the shallows, poking the mud with long poles. One pulls up something that looks like a branch, but when the sun catches it, the surface gleams wet and dark. It bends slowly in his grip, and he drops it instantly, cursing as the residue sticks to his fingers. By midday, the air smells stronger, like rust and rain-soaked iron. The exposed mud cracks in the sunlight, revealing deep fissures that pulse faintly when you look too long. A child tosses a stone into one of the cracks, and the mud seems to swallow it, closing over the gap without a trace. The crowd disperses after that, moving quickly back toward the safety of the main road. In the evening, the mariner walks the length of the bank alone. You follow at a distance, watching him stop every few yards to press the tip of his cane into the mud. Sometimes he moves on without a word. Other times he stands longer, head tilted as if listening. When you ask later what he heard, he just says, "It's mapping again." That night, the hum returns, but softer, as if coming from deeper underground. You lie awake wondering if it's safer when you can't hear it clearly, or if that's exactly when it's closest. The following afternoon, a sharp crack echoes through the village, rolling in from the direction of the river. People freeze where they stand, some looking toward the sound, others pretending they didn't hear it. You and Thomas head toward the noise, the mariner already a few paces ahead, cane tapping quick and sharp against the packed dirt. When you reach the riverbank, the bridge is gone. Not washed away, broken. One half still juts out over the shallows, the planks split and hanging, while the other half is nowhere to be seen. The supports closest to shore are slick with black residue, the wood eaten soft enough to crumble under Thomas's touch. "This wasn't the current," he says. "It came from underneath." The mariner stands at the edge of the remaining planks, looking out at the empty space where the rest should be. "It doesn't want a crossing anymore," he murmurs. "Not for us, anyway." His words carry in the still air, making the group behind you shift uneasily. A few villagers insist they should rebuild it, but others shake their head, saying the bridge had been acting strange for days. One man swears he saw the planks flex when no one was walking on them, as if something beneath was pushing up. Another says the nails had started to rust in spirals, curling out of the wood like they were being twisted from inside. By evening, debris from the missing half washes up on the far bank. Planks warped into curves, ropes shredded into thin black strands. No one goes to collect them. The current in the middle of the river looks too smooth, too dark, like a strip of polished obsidian running between the banks. That night, the air in the village feels heavier, as though losing the bridge has changed something more than just a way across. You lie awake listening to the faint creak of wood from somewhere down by the shore. It's a sound you've heard before, slow, deliberate, and far too rhythmic to be the wind. At first, it's just one or two, a chicken missing from a coop, a goat gone from its pen. People shrug it off, animals wander, especially with the gates left open during the day. But then, in the span of a single night, 3 cows from different farms are gone. No broken fences, no hoof prints, no sound in the dark. Just absence. By morning, the talk in the square is tense and clipped. Thomas paces near the well, muttering that the animals didn't leave. They were taken. The mariner doesn't argue. It starts with the ones who can't fight back, he says. Then it gets bolder. No one asks what comes after that. You walk with a group to one of the farms at the edge of the fields. The barn doors are still barred from the outside, yet inside the stalls are empty. The straw is damp and pressed flat, bearing a faint sheen that glints in the light from the doorway. In one corner, there's a shallow groove in the floorboards, as if something heavy was dragged toward the back wall, and then simply gone. Near the tree line, you find a patch of grass flattened into a perfect circle, the blades sticking together with a thin, dark residue. The air smells sharper here, like wet rust, and the silence is heavy enough to make every breath feel loud. One of the farmers spits into the dirt and turns back toward the village without a word. By midday, more reports come in. Pigs, geese, even dogs disappearing from yards. Some villagers start tethering their livestock inside their homes, while others say it won't matter if it has already decided. The hum in the air is constant now, a low vibration that makes the wood of the buildings feel alive under your hand. That night, you dream of standing in the empty barn, the stalls yawning open, the air damp and cold. In the dream, you can hear the sound of something moving just beyond the far wall, a slow, dragging pull, followed by the hollow knock of wood on wood. When you wake, the sound is still in your ears, and for a moment you can't tell if you've actually left the dream at all. 2 nights after the animals vanish, the council calls an emergency gathering, not in the square, but at the far edge of the village where the road disappears into the fields. The mariner is already there when you arrive, standing just beyond the lantern light, cane planted in the dirt. His face is turned toward the dark horizon, as if he's waiting for something to come out of it. The councilman clears his throat and says the village has 2 choices: seal itself completely and hope whatever's happening passes, or leave before it gets worse. The crowd shifts uneasily. Some argue there's nowhere safe to go. Others say staying is certain death. The air feels heavy, like the space between heartbeats when you're waiting for bad news. As the debate grows sharper, Tomas suddenly raises a hand for silence. Everyone turns toward the fields. Out there, beyond the reach of the lanterns, faint lights flicker, small, pale, and moving in a slow arc, as if tracing a line through the night. The mariner's knuckles whiten on his cane. "That's the edge," he says quietly. Once it's inside the line, it doesn't stop. No one speaks after that. The councilman starts to say something, but the words die in his throat. Slowly, people begin to back away, their eyes fixed on the lights. The mariner turns to you as the others scatter, his voice so low you almost miss it. "We don't have until morning." By the time you reach the barn, the hum has changed. It's not steady anymore. It swells and fades like a slow breath, each exhale carrying that metallic scent. You close the door, slide the bolt into place, and lean against it, listening. Somewhere in the fields, the lights keep moving, and you know they're drawing closer with every pass. By dawn, the main street looks abandoned. Every window is shuttered from the inside, every door barred with planks that weren't there yesterday. You step out of the barn and notice how quiet it is. Not the normal kind of quiet, but a muffled stillness, like the air itself is holding its breath. Even the roosters aren't crowing. Walking toward the square, you pass houses where you know families live, but no one answers your knock. Curtains twitch, just enough to catch a glint of eyes before vanishing again. The mariner stands at the far end, cane planted, his coat pulled tight. "They're waiting for it to pass," he says. Then, almost to himself, "It never passes." Halfway down the street, you see it. A faint line of black sheen running along the base of the buildings, connecting door to door like a thread. It glistens when you tilt your head, though the sun hasn't fully risen. Tomas crouches near it, tracing the air above with a gloved finger. Not paint, he mutters. It's moving, just slow enough you don't see it. A councilman approaches, pale and sweating, saying the thread appeared overnight. Like it was drawn all at once, he says. No one heard anything. He wants to cut it, scrape it away, but the mariner shakes his head sharply. Break the line and it will find another way, he warns. It always finishes what it starts. By midday, the thread has darkened, curling into faint loops at the corners of houses. No one dares step over it. The street becomes a no man's land, villagers moving only along the back alleys, as though the main road belongs to something else now. At sunset, you watch from a doorway as the sheen pulses once, so faint you might have imagined it, and then seems to thicken just enough to catch the last light before it fades into shadow. You don't stay to see if it moves again. That night, lying in the barn, you realize you're listening for footsteps outside. But what you hear instead is the faint scrape of something dragging slowly along the street, following the black line's path from door to door. The next morning, a strange sight waits in the square. 7 lanterns, all identical, hanging from poles that weren't there yesterday. They stand in a perfect circle around the old oak tree, their glass panes dark, their metal frames slick with the same black sheen you've seen on doors and walls. No one admits to putting them there. Tomas approaches one cautiously, running his gloved hand just above the glass. Cold, he says, colder than the air. The mariner walks the circle slowly, tapping each pole with his cane. They're not here to light anything, he says. They're here to mark it. When someone asks what it is, he only glances toward the river and says nothing. By midday, the air inside the circle feels different, heavier, as though you're stepping underwater. People who pass too close say their ears pop, the way they do on a mountain. A boy dares to touch one of the lanterns. When he pulls his hand back, his fingertips are damp. Though there's no rain, he won't speak for the rest of the day. That evening, without anyone lighting them, the lanterns begin to glow, a pale, milky light that seems to bleed into the air rather than shine. It doesn't reach far, and it casts no shadows, but it makes the space inside the circle look warped, like you're viewing it through rippling water. The council orders everyone to stay away, but by nightfall, you see figures lingering at the edge, staring in. From your spot near the barn, you watch the mariner walk into the circle. The light bends around him, distorting his shape. He stands for a long time in front of the old oak, then turns and walks back out, his face unreadable. When you ask what he saw, he answers simply, roots. That night, the lanterns keep glowing, their pale light visible even through the shutters. You lie awake wondering if they're marking something that's already here, or something that's still on its way. It starts just after midnight, a faint, rhythmic sound that's not quite words, drifting through the cracks in the barn walls. You sit up, thinking it's someone walking past, but the sound doesn't move. It lingers, low and steady, like a conversation happening in another room. You slip outside, the air cool and damp. The village is dark, every window shuttered, but the whispers are clearer now. They seem to come from different directions at once. Behind the barn, from the square, even from the riverbank. You can't make out the language, but the cadence is unmistakable. Questions and answers, pause and reply. Thomas emerges from his workshop holding a lantern. His eyes are wide. You hear it too? He asks. You nod, and he mutters something about voices traveling differently at night. The mariner appears out of the shadows, his coat collar pulled high. They're not talking to us, he says. They're talking about us. The 3 of you move toward the square, drawn by the sound. As you pass the circle of lanterns, their milky glow pulses once, and the whispers grow louder. You can hear the rhythm in your bones now, a slow beat that makes your chest tighten. Tomas stops just short of the oak tree. It's under us, he whispers. The mariner bends, pressing his palm to the ground. His eyes close, and for a moment you think he's listening to the earth itself. Then he stands and says, "It's counting." The word hangs in the cold air, and the whispers fall silent all at once, leaving the square in a stillness so sudden it makes your ears ring. Back in the barn, you try to sleep, but every time you drift off, you dream of standing at the river's edge, voices murmuring just beyond the dark surface, each syllable sending ripples toward your feet. By the following evening, the village feels like it's holding its breath. No one goes to the river, no one walks the main road, and the square is empty except for the 7 lanterns, still glowing that strange milk-white light. The mariner spends the day pacing the perimeter, his cane tracing lines in the dirt like he's sketching something only he can see. At sunset, a deep vibration rolls through the ground. Not the hum you've grown used to, but a heavier, slower thrum that makes the walls of the barn tremble. You step outside and see the others standing in doorways, eyes fixed toward the fields. Out there, on the far edge where you'd seen the flickering lights days ago, a new line of light has appeared. This one isn't faint. It's sharp, bright, and moving. The line advances in steady pulses, each flare bringing it closer. You can see now that it's not a single beam, but dozens of small points arranged in a perfect arc. They move with purpose, their glow reflecting in the black sheen that now runs through every crack in the street. Thomas joins you, his hammer hanging loosely at his side. "That's not the edge anymore," he says. "That's inside." The mariner steps into the middle of the road, his shadow stretching toward the oncoming light. "It will reach the circle before dawn," he says, not turning to look at you. "When it does, the river won't be the only thing it owns." One by one, shutters close, leaving the street in darkness. You stay where you are, watching the slow, deliberate advance. Each pulse of light feels like a heartbeat, and with every beat, the space between you and it shrinks. That night, lying in the barn, you realize you've stopped listening for the hum. You don't need to, because now, whatever's coming, you can see it. And that's where we leave it tonight. Whatever was waiting out there, still moving, still counting, still closing the distance. Maybe it's closer now than you think. If you've been here with me all the way, you've walked every shadowed street, heard every hum, and seen the lights on the horizon. You've earned your rest, but maybe keep one eye open. Before you drift off, tell me in the comments, how would you rate tonight's disaster on a scale from 1 to 10? And what would you have done if you'd been there? If you enjoyed this journey into the dust of history, subscribe so you don't miss the next forgotten catastrophe. Sleep well, dream deep, and if you hear a hum in the dark, maybe don't follow it. Good night. Peaceful, dreaming of forgotten ruins. Good night. See you in the dust of history.